New Mets ace Freddy Peralta is reportedly open to a contract extension with the New York Mets. Is this a deal they have to get done?
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. On the show today, we're going to talk about Freddy Peralta, and if this is the pitcher that David Stearns is willing to commit to long-term, do the Mets need to extend him to justify the cost of trading for him? In the first segment, I want to break down the past relationship between Freddy Peralta and David Stearns, and if it makes sense that this would be the guy that he'd be willing to commit to. In the second segment, we're going to talk about what a contract could look like and why it would be advantageous for the Mets to get a deal done. In the final segment, though, I'm going to provide the counter argument. Is there a reason to not sign Peralta? Should they instead rent him and pursue Skubal next offseason? We'll go through all of that to close out the show. Before we get to any of it, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the #1 daily podcast on the New York Mets. Want to find any of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. Now, Pat Ragazzo of Sports Illustrated reported on Thursday, that Freddy Peralta is open to signing a contract extension with the New York Mets. And then a few others, I think, also confirmed that reporting. Now, this was also reported before a deal even got done, where it was sort of rumored that Aces, his agency, which I believe also represented David Wright back in the day, but they have been open to extensions in the past, and they would be open to talking extension on Freddy Peralta, because Freddy Peralta, at this point in his career, we'll talk about more of the specifics in the next segment, but he's only made about $22 million across his career. And so to get a deal done now and not have to run the risk of going out there and pitching on a one-year deal, it would be really smart to get a deal done. But the Mets also might say, you know what, let's just hold on to Freddy Peralta for this year. We can tag him with a qualifying offer. We can go into the market with a very deep free agent class next winter and see what happens. So it's a really interesting conversation that we're going to have on the show today. And I don't think that this is going to happen tomorrow. Okay. So I want to say that on the front end as we're just talking about the report. He's open to it, but these are the type of deals, as we saw Francisco Lindor and the Mets made that trade back in 2021, that during spring training, that's when, after Peralta gets acclimated to the organization, you get him into a room and you try to hammer something out. But before we get into contract details, should the Mets do it, all that good stuff, is this the guy that David Stearns would be comfortable committing to? If you heard his press conference about the trade yesterday, you would think the answer is yes. David Stearns has known Freddy Peralta since he had braces, quite literally, because he was wearing braces when he made his debut for the Brewers back in 2018. Who knows? Maybe he got him put on once he got into the Brewers organization. This was one of the first trades that David Stearns made as the GM of the Brewers. In December of 2015, he traded Adam Lind for 3 prospects, traded him to the Mariners. Peralta had signed with the Mariners back in 2013. So a few years into his career, he gets traded to the Brewers organization, and that's where he spent most of his development, starting at 19 years old when Stearns had acquired him. So he has known this guy since he was literally a kid. Now, Peralta was not the highest regarded prospect in the Brewers system. He was the 10th best prospect going into the 2018 season, but he quickly made his debut on May 13th against the Rockies, and he set a franchise record with 13 strikeouts in his debut, pitching at Coors across 5 2/3 innings pitched. Now, he went on to pitch to a 4.25 ERA in about 80 innings that year. In 2019, he pitched to a 5.29 ERA in 85 innings. Now, that was at 23 years old. In February of 2020, David Stearns signs Freddy Peralta to an extension where they bought out the rest of his arbitration. He had 2 more pre-arb years, 3 years of arbitration. They bought all that out. 5 years, $15.5 million. That alone would not have been a drastic underpay. Like through the ARB system, would Peralta have probably made more? Yes. But that alone would have been a fine deal, but it wasn't just 5 for 15 and a half. David Stearns got two $8 million club options added into that deal, which ultimately results in this upcoming year, him not being in free agency, the Brewers still having this team control, and the Mets able to pull off this trade. And for the Brewers, they're able to take that contract and turn it into two top 100 prospects and now 12 years of control between Jet Williams and Brandon Sproat. So it's a very interesting sort of turn of events that this has now come full circle, and this guy is due for a contract again. And the guy that kind of fleeced him the first time is the one he would be negotiating with. But it does seem like David Stearns and Freddy Peralta have a really good relationship. Stearns spoke glowingly about Peralta and how he has gotten the absolute most out of his abilities, talked about him being a hard worker, talked about him getting better each and every year, talking about how he has grown into a leadership role in that Brewers clubhouse, which makes sense when there's so much turnover and guys don't really make it, to beyond free agency. A lot of them don't even make it to free agency as Brewers because they get traded before that. He's been the guy. There's been video circulating of him doing some type of an interview where he talked about how if there's a day game, everyone knows in the clubhouse that after the game, they're coming to my house, and everyone would go to Freddy Peralta's and hang out. He is charismatic. He, I think, also has a level of star power that's going to shine in New York. In some ways, I think Freddy Peralta, he's almost like this perfect bridge between Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto, because in terms of personality, he's a lot more like Lindor. He's into fashion. He's got a big smile. He's very charismatic. But also he can relate to Soto because he's Dominican. So I just can see this guy showing up to spring training and fitting seamlessly in that clubhouse. And he gives you a guy that knows how to do the job, a guy that knows how to be a frontline starter. You look at the career, I know we've talked about it before, but worth mentioning again. After he signs that extension, he strikes out 47 in 29 and a third innings pitched in 2020. That has his first full season making starts every fifth day in a rotation in the big leagues. In 2021, he pitched to a 2.81 ERA and strikes out 195 batters and 144 in the third innings pitched. Missed a lot of time in 2022 with a lat injury, but bounced back in a big way in 2023, where he pitched to a 3.86 ERA with 210 strikeouts and 165 and two-third innings pitched. He has now 3 years in a row matched those numbers in regards to a sub-4 ERA each year, over 200 strikeouts each year, over 165 innings each year. And last season, he pitched to a career best 2.70 ERA, finished 5th in the NL Cy Young voting. He's one of the best pitchers in baseball. He's ready to be the Mets ace for the 2026 season. But when you have that past relationship to draw on, where David Stearns, again, saw him embrace make his debut, saw him as a teenager even before that. And at one point in time, Freddy Peralta was known as Fastball Freddy because that's all he had, a fastball. And even then, his first season, the average velocity of his fastball was 90.7 miles per hour as a rookie. Last year was 94.8. You look at Freddy Peralta as a rookie, I don't know if he's quite a string bean, but he is nowhere near as filled out as he is now as a grown man who's a horse atop a rotation, who is just a really great athlete. And you can just see that with his presence on the mound. He's got a full arsenal now, a changeup that's been much improved, curveball, slider as well. Got whiffs over 30% of the time on all of those secondary pitches. His fastball was still strong. The expected batting average against all of his pitches last year was under 200 outside of his fastball. And his fastball expected batting average was 237. You look at the under the hood stuff, ranked in the 80th percentile or better, and expected batting average exit velocity, whiff percentage, strikeout percentage, hard hit percentage, and even at just 6 foot tall, his extension is within the top, 20% of the league, above the 80th percentile. Again, the guy's a leader, can be a special presence in that clubhouse for a long time. Only 29 years old, turns 30 in June, and he is open to a contract extension. So once the Mets get into spring training, seems like an obvious conclusion to make that they should extend this guy. But what we're going to talk about next is what would it cost? What are some of the comps in the past that we can look at to try to see what it would take to sign him? And is it a deal worth making? We'll go through all of that in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert start to finish without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out the forms, you can meet a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They'll handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms, and they will work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates in the TurboTax app as they're working through it. It's a huge time saver and gives you a real peace of mind knowing that an expert is handling it. For me personally, I'm all self-employed with my taxes, so it can be a little bit complicated. And it's so nice to have a local expert that can just take that burden off my plate. So take it off yours as well. Get back to your life. Visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointments today. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert doesn't file for you or didn't file for you last year, you just have to file by February 28th. Again, take those taxes off your plate, get back to your life, and visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get to our next goal of 16,000 subscribers by opening day. We're past 15,500 after a huge week. So first, thank you all who have subscribed this week. Thank you all for tuning in. This has been, I think, probably by far the most watched week of Locked On Mets in our history. So that's been really awesome to see. And so I appreciate all of you for tuning in. I appreciate David Stearns for giving us such an exciting week. Let's talk about contract and if David Stearns would be willing to give out a long-term deal. I want to first start with the notion that David Stearns is averse to giving out any long-term deals. I think way too often we are seeing people jump to conclusions about how David Stearns is going to operate the New York Mets based on his past with the Brewers. And that's just not fair. And it's also just, it's not accurate because, look, would David Stearns ever offer a high AAV short-term deal as the Brewers GM? Of course not. Of course not. Because they don't have, I mean, maybe if it was Rhys Hoskins off an injury, and that wasn't even his contract, but those are the type of deals we've seen the Brewers go, or maybe it's a 1-year deal or 1+1 at a little bit of a higher AAV than they're used to signing players. But would Stearns ever be able to give Bo Bichette $42 million per as the Brewers GM? No. And you just cannot look back and say, oh, that's how he views it, and that's it. It's an end-all, be-all, and he has the same thoughts in every pitcher. He will never, ever go beyond 3 years on the contract. And I feel like there's Mets fans that actually think that that's the truth. Why don't we actually look and try to provide context to David Stearns as the Mets president of baseball operations? Who would you have liked him to give a long-term deal to since he took over? He might be like, oh, there's so many guys. You know, Corbin Burns is a free agent, right? And who else? Let's go through it. First year as the Mets GM or president. Yet Aaron Nola was the one guy who got a long-term deal in that class, 7 years. Blake Snell, 2-year deal with an opt-out. Jordan Montgomery, 1-year deal. That was a bad one. Only 3 stars in that class actually got a contract that was even longer than 4 years. It was Nola, it was Ohtani, which is a whole different beast, and it was Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who the New York Mets put 10 years and $325 million in front of, and they took that to the Dodgers, and the Dodgers said, thank you very much, and they signed him. So the Mets that year pursued the only free agent that got more than 4 years outside of Nola. The only one. And you weren't going to sign Nola, and it's a good thing you didn't sign Nola because he's not very good anymore, and he still has 5 years left on that deal. Last year, who was the free agent? I said Corbin Burns. Okay, that's the guy. Well, we don't know their past relationship. I believe David Stearns was the one that won the arbitration case against Corbin Burns. So who knows if the bad blood that Corbin Burns had against the Padres at the end would have trickled to Stearns. Would not surprise me. But Corbin Burns wanted to be in Arizona. And guess what happened? He signed a 6-year deal and he got TJ in year 1. Now the Diamondbacks basically are paying him for 6 years to get 4 years of production, which would be the case for not giving out long-term deals. The other free agents in that class, Blake Snell, was never going anywhere but the Dodgers. Max Fried got an 8-year deal at 31 years old. Great contract last year, but what's that going to look like in 3 or 4 years? Who knows? Nick Pivetta got a 4-year deal, which we're familiar with because we talked about the Mets trading for that deal this offseason. Complete poison pill contract with all the player options and all of the stipulations being player friendly. So you look at last year's class, you look at everyone else reading the market. Where was the guy to sign to a long-term deal? And then you get to this year's class. Dylan Cease, 7 for 210, a lot of deferrals. Who knows if the Mets are in, but the Blue Jays got that deal done early. Ranger Suarez, 5 years, 130, $26 million per for Ranger Suarez. I mean, I think it's a good deal, certainly for him. I think for the Red Sox, it made sense as a pivot to make to potentially make some of your other young starting pitching more expendable, to try to go out and maybe add a bat. We'll see if they can pull off a trade for Isaac Paredes or what they do, but it made sense for the Red Sox. Don't think Ranger Suarez was a good enough arm. The Mets could have signed him to that deal, given up the comp picks, and said, all right, you're our ace, Ranger. I just don't think that that was the move to make. Now, Framber's still out there, but Framber's older than Freddy Peralta, and you have whatever character concerns you might think about for Framber compared to Peralta. So, Freddy Peralta, at this point, if you look at all of the free agents that the Mets could have signed over the last couple of off seasons, he's the first one outside of Yoshinobu Yamamoto that you would think that David Stearns would be interested in signing long-term, because they have that past relationship. He glowed about the person. He glowed about the work ethic. He glowed about how much he's gotten better and where he's at and how he's got the most out of his abilities. You look at Freddie compared to Dylan Cease, it's such a good comp because these are two guys who have struck out over 200 batters in each of the last 3 years. They're the only two who have done that. Actually, I don't know if Zach Wheeler got to 200 this past season. I will say the last 3 years, Zach Wheeler is with those two as the three guys who have cleared 600 strikeouts over the last 3. But still, the comp for Cease and Peralta, it's just so close. They're close in age. Cease is 6 months older. Dylan Cease has a little bit of an inflated ERA, but if you look at the expected ERA, 3.63 for Cease, 3.53 for Peralta. Strikeout rate almost identical, 28.9% for Freddie, 28.8% for Cease. The walk rate close, 8.8% for Freddie, 9.9% for Cease over the last 3 years. Left on base percentage, big difference. Peralta almost 80%, 79.8 compared to Cease at 69.3%. So that is why Peralta's ERA has been so much better. He's been a lot better at getting out of jams than Dylan Cease has. The AAV for Cease, when you factor in the deferrals, $26.75 million. Ranger Suarez, $26 million again. So you look at that as the comp, and then you look at next year's free agent class. Could Freddy Peralta do better than $26 million per next offseason? There's a chance, because he'd be the second best free agent theoretically. There's a lot of competition in that class. You got Kevin Gausman and Chris Sale, who are both older, but still very effective arms still. You have Michael King, who has an opt-out, so if he pitches well, he hits the market again. Jesus Luzardo is a free agent. Shane Bieber will be a free agent. Tatsuya Imai could be a free agent. He has an opt-out. Brandon Woodruff could be a free agent, or will be a free agent with the qualifying offer. You also have Shota Imanaga, who would be a free agent. It's a very, very deep class. I do think Freddy Peralta is the second best arm of that grouping of names right now, especially when you compare age to Chris Sale as far as a free agent. But it is a loaded class, so there will be options for the New York Mets if they decide to ride this thing out. And they would tag him with the QO, and so you would potentially get draft picks if you sign elsewhere. You don't have to do this, but why you do it is because you are locking up a guy and saying you are a part of this team. You are a part of this new core. This is not Bo Bichette on a mercenary deal. This is not Luis Robert on a prove-it club option. This is a guy that you are saying he's going to be a pillar of this organization. You traded Brandon Sproat. You traded Jet Williams to get him. Why have him for 1 year, extend him, and have him for 6 or 7 years of control? So if it is a 6-year extension on top of the year that he has, the end of that deal, Freddy Peralta will be 36. Not crazy to have a guy that's just getting into the back half of his 30s when the deal ends. But you might not have to go that long on Freddy Peralta because you have all the leverage. He's making $8 million this year. His career earnings sit at 23. He'll break $30 million in career earnings this year. And the Mets could put a $30 million signing bonus on the table and say, hey, you want to double your career earnings right now? Do you want to make more money than you've already made in your entire life right this moment by signing on this dotted line? You want to not risk getting hurt this year and having the pressure of pitching on a contract year. You can be free and easy and you're just a leader of this rotation ready to go. I think it makes all the sense in the world to get this thing done, especially because of that leverage that you have and the ability to really sign a deal that can help you still pursue Skubal, can help you give out contracts to Nolan McLean and Jonah Tong if he proves worth it, so that you can keep this core together and have an affordable rotation. And so you don't have to get to free agency with Peralta where to keep him. You got to pay him $30 million per season if he has an awesome year. Here's what I would look at. Again, he's making $8 million for this upcoming season. If it was a 5-year deal, $28 million per, it's $140 million. You add that on to the $8 million that he's already got. Now you're talking about 6 for $150. You're in that range. 6-year deal at $26 million per, which again is where Rangers, the middle ground of Ranger, Suarez, and Dylan Cease. They both are around $26 million per. For Cease, 7 years for Ranger, 5 years, right in the middle. That would be, if we were just talking Freddy Peralta as a free agent, 6 for $156. Now you could tack that on top of the $8 million that he already has and make this like a 7-year deal altogether. But I don't even know if you have to do that. One thing before I get to the final deal that I put on the table. The interesting part about an extension is there are two ways to go about it. On one hand, if Steve Cohen is already dreading the tax bill he's about to pay, you can sign an extension that does not kick in until after the season. So Freddy Peralta gets a $30 million signing bonus. That could come after the season. So it's basically just signing the free agent deal now, but he's still pitching for $8 million. That's what happened with Garrett Crochet last year. The Red Sox only paid Garrett Crochet whatever his ARB number was, $3 or $4 million. He got a $4 million signing bonus on a $170 million deal, but all of that kicked in after his first season. So they were able to still have the light luxury tax hit. They're able to go out and get Alex Bregman, do everything they wanted to do to build that team, and still have Crochet be affordable for year one before getting into now the deal that is clearly worth after an awesome season. If I'm the Mets, though, I think I'd rather do the deal where it kicks in immediately, where you take that $8 million, you loop it in or you throw it out, whatever you want to do with that. But you sign him to a deal now. Yes, your luxury tax hit for this upcoming season is going to be more, but it's going to be less moving forward under that new CBA. So if this is a long-term deal, you don't have to worry as much about trying to build around it because you can maybe lock him into a number that's super team friendly. So let's get into that side of it. What is the contract? What if it's 6 for $140? Imagine this: $32 million signing bonus to make the money even, $8 million that he still gets as his salary for the upcoming season. So he's getting $32 million, signs on the dotted line, then he gets paid what he was going to, but the extension kicks in immediately. That means that once we get into the free agent years of Freddy Peralta, the New York Mets are only paying him $20 million per season over 5 years. The total luxury tax hit for that deal starting this year, $23.3 million. That's Luis Castillo money. Not bad. Not bad at all. He'd be 35 at the end of that deal. In terms of new money for his free agent years, because again, he's only set to make $8 million this year. His free agent years are buying out at 5 for $132. That's $26.4 million per, right there in between Ranger and Dylan Cease, right in between where they were both at in terms of average annual value. And you're getting the short end of it. It's only 5 years. Now for Peralta, he gets to cash in right now, takes all the risk out. He gets $32 million immediately. Go buy yourself a nice place in the city. And he gets that security. So, yeah, is it selling low on himself a little bit? Sure. But it's not that low. It's still per average annual value right in line with what I think his market could be. He's only selling himself short on years. And if you wanted to, you can add on a player option, because if you add on a player option, that's guaranteed money on the deal. So let's just say you put I don't know, we'll call it a $15 million player option on it. Then all of a sudden, for the average annual value, you're taking, instead of 6 for 140, it'd be 7 for 155. So then you're talking about, for luxury tax purposes, now it drops to 22.1 instead of 23.3. So there's ways that you can add a little more incentives to it. You can also, I said present day value, you can give him a bigger number, but defer money too. So he could be the guy that's getting deferrals. You kind of do a Dodger structure of big signing bonus up front, deferrals on the back end to take the present day value down. But ultimately, if you can end up getting a deal done where, I think, again, better in my opinion that it starts immediately, because if you're already blowing a crazy tax bill, you might as well just go for it, do the deal now, and make it easier on yourself for the next 5 years beyond it. If you can get to a point where the luxury tax hits below $25 million for Freddy Peralta, now you're paying Freddy Peralta essentially a qualifying offer rate over 5 years or 5 free agent years. That's great value for Freddy Peralta and for the Mets. I mean, it's great value for the Mets, but anything for Peralta, yes, you're probably selling yourself a bit short if you were able to repeat your last season and hit the market. But you're going to hit the market with the QO, and you're going to hit the market with the looming lockout. So I think if you just think about all of those things, you think about $23 million in career earnings and getting $32 million put in front of you, this makes all the sense in the world. The question now is, do the Mets do it? Is this the deal that they ultimately agree on, where they give a pitcher long-term money? I want to talk about the pros and cons of it here in the next segment. Could it make more sense to do the other aspect of this we've been talking about all season? Rent Peralta, buy Skubal. We'll go through that to close out the show in just a minute. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now it's time to take it up a level. Go ad free. Join the Everyday Club today and get Locked On Mets without the interruptions. You also get access to our Discord channel, talk to other Mets fans, and you get access to a merch shop, all there for you as part of the Everyday Club. If you want to be part of the club, you can find a link in the episode description. Go to lockedonmets.supercast.com. All right, so let's talk about the downside to extending Freddy Peralta. You might take yourself out of the Tarik Skubal running if you do that deal, because you already got Soto and Lindor on the books. You are going to clear off a lot of money with Sean Manaea having 1 year after this, Kodai Senga 1 year after this, Clay Holmes 1 year after this. The Frankie Montas money finally comes out the book after the current season, even though he's already done with the Mets. They already cut him. For luxury tax purposes, he's still whatever it was, $17 million for this season. So you are going to get out of some money in your rotation, and this would be the one guy that you'd be committed to. But if Nolan McLean's awesome, that's a frontline starter that maybe you want to extend pre-arb. You're not going to get him for 5 for 15.5, but who knows what you could sign him to. Jonah Tong. He's another guy. I don't want to say extension candidate, but another guy that could be a big part of your rotation on the cheap for the next 6 years. Christian Scott. I don't know how much control Christian Scott still has, but again, another guy that can be a part of your rotation. Tobias Myers that you've not picked up could be part of your rotation. You still have Jack Wenninger, who is going to be a top 100 prospect. I would almost say consensus coming up soon here. I think he's ready for a big-time breakout. And he's big league depth, in my opinion, right now. Looking at Christian Scott, I'm thinking it's 5 years of control based on what I'm seeing on Fangraphs. So you have a lot of young pitching. That's not even mentioned Jonathan Santucci or Will Watson or Zach Thornton. There's so many names in this system. If you really believe in your ability to keep developing pitching, and you're only going to sign one guy, and you want a chance at Skubal, you can make the case to just give Freddy Peralta the qualifying offer after this season. He's not going to accept unless he had a bad year. But if he does, cool. 1 year deal for Peralta, not bad on a bounce back if it was a bad year. But assuming he has a great year, tag him with the QO, and you still have an open dialogue, and you still very well could sign him. And yeah, you might pay a little bit more, but you keep that financial flexibility in case you'd rather jump on Tarik Skubal, jump on Shane Bieber, Jesus Luzardo, whoever your flavor of the month is at that time. I think it makes sense to just get a deal done with the bird in hand. Do you really want to be part of the Tarik Skubal sweepstakes and have Scott Boras trying to get $500 million out of you, going through all of that? Look, I love the idea of Skubal and the Mets. I think they should be in that conversation, certainly. But do you want to go into that conversation needing to sign him and being concerned about, oh no, what if in the meantime, while you're going down this road with Skubal, someone gives Freddy Peralta 7 for 210 like Dylan Cease got, and he's like, all right, cool, I'm done, I'm going. That could happen. Instead, just lock up Freddy Peralta right now. It is the wisest thing for this team to do, I think. It allows you to feel much more comfortable with the return that you parted with. It allows Freddy Peralta to be emboldened to lead that rotation and to lead that clubhouse from the pitching side because he's locked up. He's the guy that's going to be there. There's so many benefits to getting a deal done because it's going to be a much better deal now than it's going to be in a year if Freddy Peralta has a good season. If he has a bad season, well, that's the other reason to not do this, right? You are getting a chance to watch Freddy Peralta pitch in a Mets uniform for a year and make sure that it's a good fit. But I don't think that that's going to be a problem. I think this guy is a seasoned pro at this point. I think he knows his craft. He knows how to get through a season and be a very effective starting pitcher. And I'd be willing to just commit to him right now because I think it's going to be a much better deal than if you wait. And so I just get the deal done. And if you put that contract in front of him, like the one that I mentioned, where it could be 6 for 140, again, maybe you juice the total dollars by deferring money and get one more deferral contracts under the books that could get grandfathered into the new CBA if they do change the way that deferrals are structured, which I think is a distinct possibility. I think this is the guy to sign. And ultimately, if you were about to sign Framber and he wasn't going to sign a 3-year deal, and you would have to have signed Framber to a 5-year deal, we talked about that all offseason, that trading for Peralta and giving him an extension would be a better use of your resources than trying to sign Framber, who's years older. And you have to get comp picks for. Yes, you just gave up, prospects to get Peralta. But I think if Freddy Peralta was in this year's free agent class, he would have been right there with Dylan Cease atop this market. And he might have been the best arm. To me, Freddy Peralta is already the best arm that has changed teams this offseason. And so that's exciting enough for 2026, but I think it gets more exciting if you just give him the deal. And I think while the past notion is, David Stearns would never give it a long-term investment, he has said it's a case-by-case basis. And the way that he talked about Freddy Peralta in the presser, to me, that shows a guy that he's very comfortable investing in, and it's a good move to make. So I think once the Mets get into spring, Freddy Peralta is chopping it up with Lindor and Soto, and he sees the difference of being on a big market team and the resources that are present, just even in the spring training facility. I think you get him into a room with his agency, you put a big signing bonus in front of him. I think you can get a deal done that's fair to him, but also team friendly for the Mets so that they can continue to build a winner around Freddy Peralta moving forward. So we'll see if they do it. That's going to be all, though, for this edition of Locked On Mets. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Also, I mentioned this a couple episodes ago before all the craziness. I think it was before the Luis Robert trade. I am looking for a little bit of help for this upcoming season. I'm going to be doing interviews next week for potential interns, producers. I'm still kind of fluid figuring out exactly what I need and the help that I'm looking for, but it's going to be awesome to just meet with a bunch of you. I already have a handful who have reached out to me after I talked about this a couple days ago. But if you're interested, if you're a college student, if you are an everydayer that's been tuning in and knows all about the Mets and you're always locked into this show and you want to be part of it in a different way, reach out to me. If you're an everydayer, just shoot me a text. If you follow me on Twitter, you can just DM me there and just send me the resume over, and I will be doing interviews with people next week. And it's going to be good to just add some more people to the Locked On Mets team because it's pretty much been me, a one-man show, producing this for all these years. And I think we can grow the show a lot more if I have a little bit of help. So I wanted to mention that one more time for anybody else that wants to be involved with that process. Again, it's going to go down next week. So just reach out to me. And also tune in throughout the weekend, because with all of the recent Mets news, with all of the changes that this brings to the Mets roster, I think there's a lot of conversation that we can have about this team and what's next. Is the rotation done? That might be the show tomorrow, because apparently the Mets are maybe showing a little bit of interest in Jose Quintana. Could they sign Quintana, trade Peterson? A lot of interesting stuff that we'll be talking about throughout the weekend. So make sure you all follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network.